TNT. Welcome to Brian Lehrer Live. We're here Wednesday nights at 7:30, and here's one of my little secrets. I love to be in New York in the heat of the summer when half the city has fled. You can have your Hamptons, you can have your country home. I'll take the uncrowded subways, the free music in the parks, and the bike path less traveled. So let's talk about summer in the city. Later this hour, we'll check out what's happening at Celebrate Brooklyn in Prospect Park and the River to River Festival in Lower Manhattan. But first, a New Yorker who would have been Parks Commissioner for life if they had let him, perhaps, and they almost did. Henry Stern was Parks Commissioner under Mayor Koch and then again under Mayor Giuliani, 15 years in all. He now has his own public policy group called New York Civic, and of course, he blogs, who doesn't, at nycivic.org. In Henry Stern's case, erstwhile commissioner, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Do you like to be in the city in the summer?
Yeah, I enjoy it. As you say, it's less crowded on the subway. It's traditionally, the summer is Parks busy season. That's when we have most of the concerts. The Philharmonic goes around the boroughs, as does the Metropolitan Opera. The Shakespeare Festival is up in Central Park. It started with Macbeth, and the next play is, I think, Mother Courage by Brecht. And there are just loads of things to do, people to see. There's less pressure. You don't have to wear a tie. I kind of like it.
And we have pools, we have beaches,
oh, do
we have stadiums. You know, I live in, I think, the neighborhood where you grew up, Inwood.
Inwood, it's terrific.
In the very northern tip of Manhattan. And when I moved to Inwood just last year,
yeah,
I was surprised to discover that there was a bus there, the BX-12, which you can get on right at 207th Street and Broadway, and it takes you all across Fordham Road in the Bronx. And where's its destination?
Pelham Bay Park.
Well, the beach. It's the what do you call it? Orchard Beach.
Orchard Beach.
And at first, I could hardly believe it, but now you go on that bus and you see there are families with kids and blow-up toys and everything like that, and it's families going to the beach in the Bronx on the bus.
I took that bus when it was a trolley, just briefly, 6 months or so, and I took the bus to go to school, which I did in the Bronx.
How many of the boroughs have beaches?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. The Bronx is Orchard Beach. Queens is the Rockaways. Brooklyn is Coney Island. Staten Island is South Beach and Midland Beach. And Manhattan will have a beach,
really, as
part of the new Hudson River Park. They're doing a little cove near Gansevoort Pier at 13th Street, trying to catch the water in a little inlet so that you won't be subject to the tides and strong currents of the Hudson. But now that the water is cleaned up...
It is clean enough to swim in?
Yes, it is. The last 20 years have been extraordinary for water quality in New York. And the water is now, I mean, I wouldn't stick my head into it while I was
it's
swimming.
Swim without putting your head in the water.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's not drinkable, but it's swimmable. And we've initiated races through the Manhattan Island Foundation. They're swimming around Manhattan in the Hudson and Harlem rivers. There's you swim from park to park. They have different races down from Riverside Park to Chelsea Piers. They sponsor those programs.
This would be a specialty competition called a head out of the water swim, right?
Yeah, well, the real swim, they keep their head. They do the crawl, they do the rest of it. You know, just don't.
And I think Long Island City, where that water taxi is, has a beach now.
Yeah, Gantry Beach. There's a, I don't know if it has a beach, and there's going to be a party there next week. I don't know if it's a swimming beach yet, that people dip their toes into the East River.
So it may just be a sunbathing beach.
I don't know. There's
a sandcastle building.
There's been a plan for many years, Ann Buttenwieser's, to have a floating swimming pool as they have in some European cities.
Interesting.
Which have a, and we've all been working at it for about 40 years.
A faux beach.
Yes, but a portable beach.
And you can go surfing in the Atlantic Ocean off the Rockaways.
Yes, in fact, we named a street in the Rockaways for Duke, and I can't pronounce it. It's like, it starts with K-A-N-E, then it's 3 more syllables. He was the champion surfer of Hawaii many years ago, and is the sort of the Babe Ruth of surfing.
What I do remember is when you pronounce a Hawaiian name,
yes,
you pronounce every vowel. So
right.
Next time you see it in print, that's how you do it. Here's a stat. How many public golf courses are there in New York City?
There are 13 public golf courses
right.
in New York. Well,
I mean,
know how many colonies were there that formed the United States. There's some things that are just basic.
That's a mnemonic device for you. It's the same number as the colonies is the number of public golf courses. There was an article in the New York Sun last week about city golf courses. That's how I know. Are they in all 5 boroughs? Does Manhattan have a golf course?
No, it does not. They have them in Queens, and I don't. Now it's been 4 years since I've been out as commissioner, but I remember La Tourette golf course in Queens, and I think there's South Shore as well, are 2 of them. In the Bronx, there's
one in Bayside, Queens. I know that.
Yes, there is. That's Clearview.
Yes, very
golf
good.
course. Well, that's
right at the foot of the Throgs Neck Bridge by the Clearview Expressway.
That's right. Very.
I know
good.
my city.
Down
I know
there.
my city.
Right. Do you golf?
No, I don't golf.
No.
But I do play tennis. And
535 tennis courts.
Very good. I didn't know that one. And I do have my municipal tennis permit for $100 a year, $10 a piece for my kids.
That's a good deal.
What does it cost to golf on a municipal golf course?
It's in the 20s, the mid-20s. They've gone up. It's very cheap compared with private courses, which charge $60, $100, and of course the elegant ones like Pebble Beach are hundreds of dollars a day if they let you on.
And one of your legacies is that you in the 80s launched privatization, is that the word,
right,
of the golf courses?
Yeah, you got to be not ashamed to say it. We tried it on a trial basis. We wanted to put them out for bid and let the high bidder run them. And that is the high bid person would pay the most to the city. And it's been enormously successful, so that over a period of years, they've all been privatized because the private keeps better care of it. Closer supervision of the workforce, the more industry applied to it, doing whatever is necessary to attract customers because they have the bottom line. And we concluded that whatever the merits of socialism, is certainly no way to run a golf course.
And yet, how do they make money if they put all this investment into fixing up the golf courses? And that's part of the legacies, that
Sure.
so many of the golf courses, according to this article in the Sun, are so much nicer than they were once upon a time when they were run by the city, but the price is still relatively reasonable, probably about, in today's dollars, what you were charging then, yes?
Oh, less than we were charging then, because I think the rates have gone up, at least while I was commissioner, at less than the rate of inflation. Because of all things to be done by civil servants, taking care of a golf course, who was there to supervise? It's a wide and extended area. Who was there to see that basically young kids who were doing it do a full day's work? It doesn't lend itself to, I don't want to say the civil servant mentality, because it's summer provisionals who come in and do it, but it's a classic situation where you need hands-on supervision and people who have an economic interest in making the course work, rather than people whose interest may be in their pensions.
When you were Parks Commissioner, how much of your job was, as a matter of public policy, making sure that people who live in urban environments have nice places to play and relax in the summer? Was it framed that way?
Well, that was what the whole thing was about. I mean, parks appeal to all communities. It's a way for the poor people and lower middle class people who have to be in the city during the summer to have a place for their kids to play and to go out and have adult recreation. There are 10 Olympic-sized pools that were built by Moses in the 1930s. That was a different era, because when Moses built those giant pools, first of all, people didn't have cars to get out of the city. Second, air conditioning hadn't been invented. So it was a question of either roasting in your tenement or going down to the pool to cool off for the day.
And I love how you say, you don't say Robert Moses, you say Moses built the giant pools. It sounds biblical.
It is true. Now, it wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu. It was Moses Robert, and in fact, he was a really a brilliant man, a great parks commissioner, a self-hating Jew. He
Really?
was terrible.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, he was awful on the Jewish question. I mean, really hostile and anti-Semitic.
Regarding Israel or something else?
Oh, no, there was no Israel then. He didn't like with Jews. He didn't like. He married 2 Catholic women, which is not that bad, but he was buried in an Episcopal church. I was at the funeral. I flew out with Mayor Koch in a helicopter. I wasn't Parks Commissioner then, but I was so interested in Moses and his life that I wanted to go, and I felt Mayor Koch should go. So we flew out, and I was so excited because there was a little blue city helicopter, the police department flew 80 miles, and we landed there. Then they had the service. Then we go back to the helicopter pad, and I see this enormous helicopter. It's twice as big as our copter. It's brilliant painted red. It's brand new. It has uniformed pilots and staff. So of course you say, who is that? Who is that? Well, it was Lawrence Rockefeller, you might expect.
Right.
And he was a great conservationist. People don't realize Rockefeller. Lawrence Rockefeller was the person who did the most for conservation in the United States. He gave the country Jackson Hole, which was out in Wyoming.
Yes.
He helped put together the land for the Palisades and so on. He was a wonderful conservationist, and he lived overlooking Central Park.
And probably the most liberal of the public Rockefellers. Didn't he run, and what did he run for?
He did not run. There are others who ran. You know, Nelson was governor of New York, elected 4 times. He was pretty liberal. He was too liberal for the Republican Party.
Right, for the National Party.
For the National Republican Party. They denied him renomination as vice president. After Ford picked him to be vice president, they thought in '90 he'd run for re-election. No.
So all of what we think of Robert Moses, you know, what we associate with him, the urban redevelopment, whether we liked it or not, did he do that from a perch as Parks Commissioner?
Yes. He had a fascinating career. First of all, the fact that Robert Moses had certain difficulties, issues, they say now, issues adjusting to the fact that he was Jewish, that he was the son of Emmanuel and Bella Moses, that he grew up in New Haven, and so on. And he went to Yale, of course, and he was on the swimming team, and he sort of had some experiences there, maybe like Lawrence of Arabia. But somehow he came out of that with a just aversion to his origin and his ethnicity. But that has nothing to do with the job he did and his incredible impact on public works and on American government. For a long time, he was more important than the mayors, who turned over rather frequently.
That's right. But when you think about some of the things that had to do with land use, clearing the old tenements on the Upper West Side, and building Lincoln Center, and the newer the projects up there, it's not what you think of in association with the Parks Commission.
Right. Well, Moses had a dozen jobs at one time. He was the mayor's construction coordinator. He was head of the Committee on Slum Clearance. He was a member of the City Planning Commission, which he never attended. He sent a representative. He never occupied his office at the Arsenal, or rarely did. He had a private, public building built for him in Randall's Island, right nesting under his Triborough Bridge, which has now been called the Robert Moses Building after he passed away. And he was truly an empire builder, and he shouldn't be judged too harshly, because a lot of the things that he did were right and perfectly accepted at the time, were considered great advances.
Well, his the thorn in his side nemesis just recently died, Jane Jacobs.
Jane Jacobs.
So not everybody considered them right and proper at the time.
She's a wonderful woman. I had the privilege of knowing her, of working with her to fight the Lower Manhattan Expressway, visiting her in Canada every year for many, many years.
Really?
And I just love Jane Jacobs.
So you love Jane Jacobs and Robert Moses?
I admire Robert Moses as a public servant. But by that time, I had to fight him. It was 1962. He was in his mid-70s, and his doctrines or his beliefs were those of an earlier era. I mean, the concept of community. And also, there's still, I mean, we were right in fighting the Lower Manhattan Expressway. At that time, I was, as a young liberal, I was assistant to the borough president of Manhattan, Edward R. Dudley, later a Supreme Court judge. And I wrote memos and went to community meetings and alongside of her. And we were glad when it was Mayor Wagner who decided not to build it back in 62. And Moses sulked and retreated. And the first fight against him in the village was in the 50s when he wanted to put a depressed roadway through Washington Square Park so he could rename West Broadway 5th Avenue South. And
that was one of the big Jane Jacobs battles. I heard a Robert Moses story. I wonder if you know if it's true, talking about the beaches, that when he oversaw construction of the Southern State Parkway out to Jones Beach, that he created it as a parkway as opposed to an expressway that is no commercial vehicles, cars only, private cars only, because he didn't want the buses, which would take the masses of poor and working class people out to the beach, which he was designing as a haven for more upper or upper middle class people. Do you know that to be true?
I know it's a story in Caro's book, and there's another story in Caro. I mean, there's also there's a rumor that when he did the Colonial Park.
Robert Caro, who wrote a critical biography of Moses.
Yeah, well, which I think he might modify now that he's written 2 or 3 books on Lyndon Johnson. Moses may not be such a bad fellow by comparison, but Caro is again someone I'm privileged to know and have just the highest regard for as an author, as a scholar. He's simply prodigious. If you look at anyone closely enough, they fall apart on you. And the greater the man, says the greater his flaws. The other allegation was that he, when he built Colonial, a swimming pool in Harlem, as a frieze, he had the frieze decorated with rows of monkeys to indicate his opinion of the people.
But you don't know if that's true.
Well, I think there were monkeys there, but I would very much doubt that they were intended as a slight. He built parkways because he wanted parkways, and he was aware of the separation of parkway of ordinary motor vehicle traffic from bus and truck traffic. And at the time, they really were parkways. Now they become blurred together, and they're trying to put trucks on the west on all kinds of former parkways because they realize they have to deal with truck traffic, and that's terrible. I mean, again, parkways were a concept started in the 1920s with the Bronx River Parkway, which wound in a scenic 2-lane road in each direction that wound along the Bronx River up in Westchester, built by the Bronx River Parkway Commission. But now the parkways are getting bigger and bigger. They're 2 lanes, they're 3 lanes, they're separated roadways, they're larger and larger bridges, greater and greater expense. And the move is now to expressways for federal funds.
And I know they're talking about allowing commercial vehicles for the first time on some of the parkways, like I think the more of the Grand Central Parkway.
Yes. Because
that ethic that it can be pristine driving on any of those parkways is pretty much archaic. It's not, there isn't that distinction between parkway and expressway in terms of an experience anymore.
Well, when I was a kid, a little kid, we used to go out, of course, in the car on Sundays, and people would be Sunday drivers, and they would go up 20 miles, and they had a picnic, and they'd come back, and the idea was that a car was a recreational vehicle which a middle-class family would use to get away from home and go to the country. Later, that evolved. The Sunday driver became an epithet for people who were not skilled as drivers, and people use the car for commuting, for business, for all kinds of other purposes. And the idea of, I mean, the car was originally recreational for a lot of people.
That's right. The epithet used to be Sunday drivers. Now I think it's New Jersey drivers, but that's a whole other story.
Well, there are various sexist...
Let me ask you about ballparks. Yankee Stadium and Shea Stadium are also under the purview of the Parks Department,
yes.
right? Now, there's the current controversy over Yankee Stadium, and I wonder your opinion on it as a former Parks Commissioner, but somebody who is certainly not reflexively anti-development. But do you get sad or maybe even angry when you look at this large expanse of park that is currently McCombs Dam Park up there in Mullally Park and think that they're going to be chopped up by George Steinbrenner getting to move his ballpark where he wants?
It is troublesome. I no longer work for the city.
You can speak honestly now.
I'm a pensioner, so to some extent I'm freer. There are a number of these controversies. There was one on putting the filtration plant under Van Cortlandt Park. I basically thought that was all right, because the Parks Department got $240 million in return as mitigation for capital projects all over the Bronx. This was an underground facility. We moved it. It was originally supposed to be in the middle of the park. We got them to put it at the edge where there were no trees. It was part of a golf course. And I think pure water is very important to the people. But of course, some people were against that. Now, on Yankee Stadium, the trade-off is not nearly as good. They're putting it right smack in the middle of a park, which used to be a swamp. That's the reason it wasn't built on. When you see parks in many places, you see them built on land that was considered unbuildable. It's not that they decided that they wanted a park, but those hillside parks in Manhattan, Morningside Park, St. Nicholas Park, Jackie Robinson Park, formerly Colonial Park. I remember when they changed the name of that park, and the argument was made that colonialism was dead and was a bad thing. So I said, well, why don't you call it Anti-Colonial Park? But of course they wanted to honor a great man, and they did the right thing.
So the McCombs Dam Park was a swamp.
Yeah, sure. That's why there was a dam to hold the water when they came out from the swamp, from Jerome Avenue is now. But it hasn't been a swamp for some time, and I don't think the compensation mitigation was adequate in terms of that transaction, because I don't think the acreage that was given is really quite adds up. Some is all the way down the river. Some of it is on the tops of buildings and other places. But these things, there's like negotiations with Steinbrenner, and someone's on the outside, as I am, could always hope for a better result, and I do. And I don't think they got quite, but when you're caught up in that whirl of, when you do it, the Shea Stadium, on the other hand, is not on, even though it's nominally parkland.
Right, it's out there on...
it's out there on concrete and so on. They're going to tear the old one down. That's an easy one to accept, even though they're building a new stadium. You
know, on the McCombs Dam Park, some people think that it was allowed to get as run down as it is as a kind of city favor to Mr. Steinbrenner, because they knew he had his eye on it for eventually, and eventually is now. Any truth to that as far as you know?
That's conspiracy theory. And it's amazing how much
there is. That's what some people in the neighborhood say.
I know, in the neighborhood. That's what they talk. I remember a story that in the neighborhood talk, one woman asked another, what do you think of Khrushchev? And the woman said, I don't know, I live in the back.
Right.
So, I mean,
neighborhood talk.
This is, there's a word for it, Bürgermeister. But no, the capital, first of all, a lot of capital money did go into, we just redid the recreation building in Mullally Park, which is north of McCombs Dam Park. Second, the money for capital improvements goes for what is put in by the local council members. So the people who represent that area decide how much budget funds they want to put in the park, and Parks builds it for them. We're not in the business.
So it's more under the control of their elected representatives, you're saying, than the central government. the
yes,
city
it was.
government.
For local improvements
Yes.
like that, that park would definitely be
Right.
under the control and under the influence of the council. And Councilman Wendell Foster was chairman of the Parks Committee. He was a friend of Parks. His daughter has now succeeded to his position, and I don't think they were hostile to the park.
You're a nature lover, birds,
Yes.
particularly trees.
Yes.
How many kinds of trees are there in Central Park?
Well, I know the number of trees. There are 26,000 trees in Central Park.
Wow.
And there are dozens of varieties, you would call them species. The great elms that line Fifth Avenue are most prominent. There are the birches, there are primarily honey locusts and oaks. There's the pinetum, which was built by Arthur Ross. It's really a very eclectic collection of trees. One beautiful one was a Paulonia, a very hard wood used in Japan. And unfortunately, that died of old age a few years ago. I think it should be replaced.
What are the most common types of trees in the city?
Oh, I did a tree census in 1995, the first time they were ever counted individually, something equivalent to the first census of people in the United States in 1790. It took 205 years after that to count the trees.
And the trees can't refuse to answer the door.
That's right. All they can do is whisper in the wind. The most common of the street trees are the London planes, which Moses planted. This is a cross between a plane tree and a sycamore, Platanus X.
They have kind of blotchy bark.
Yes, they exfoliate themselves. In other words, they have, like snakes molt. These trees, the bark falls off around. There's an underlayer of bark, which they're very nice trees. But you see, whenever you have a monoculture, if those trees get a particular disease, then all your trees die. It's terrible. That's why it's important to have diversity in trees, so that if some disease strikes one kind of tree, the others will live. And now the Parks Department plants different kinds of trees, honey locusts, for example, and we have a terrible problem with the Asian longhorn beetle, ALB, which came over in Greenpoint in packing cases from China. Not intentionally, we're sure, but it's been first spotted here in 1996. They've been fighting it for 10 years. The Agriculture Department is very much involved.
Who's winning?
Well, I would say that we're holding our own if you consider that after 10 years, the forests have not been destroyed. The epidemic is still there. They've done all, they inject the trees. The moment a tree is found to be infected, not only is it completely cut down, even if it's a tiny infection in one of the higher limbs, the twig is infected, its wood is all collected and it's all burnt. They will not let anything happen to let any insects survive that are in that tree. But the trees, the insects, they also are limited because they only fly 40 or 50 feet. They don't, thank God they don't fly hundreds of feet or yards.
Enough to go from tree to tree, though.
Yeah, tree to tree, yes. Enough to go to tree to tree, but not to span a river by themselves, except I think they were taken over by a truck that crossed the Williamsburg Bridge, because after that truck crossed the bridge, you started a little outburst on the Lower East Side.
You know, the New York writer Suketu Mehta says, like Woody Allen, he is at two with nature. And that he lives in New York because he loves people. He says he would live somewhere else if he loved trees, but he loves people. Does that diminish the splendor of the trees in New York City? Do we take for granted that there are no trees in New York City when there really are?
There are 500,000 trees in New York City. They're under stress. If he loves people, he should consider India, where there are
well, he considered India, and he chose New York. He grew up in India.
Yeah, I know. We've only got 8 million people here. But it's a fight to keep them, because trees in New York are subject to so many hazards. Cars crash into them. Kids write graffiti on them. People carve the trees. People bad things to trees. Dogs pee on the trees. People throw their garbage at trees. I mean, if I were a tree, I would feel really badly about what happens to me living as a city tree. People put grates around them, and the grates then choke the trees. We've gone in.
Even though they think they're protecting the trees.
Yes. Well, they are protecting the tree for around 10 years until the tree grows large enough so that its bark grows over the metal, and the metal pierces it. And whenever I find that, I call it and have it stopped. I was the one who coined the term arborcide, A-R-B-O-R-C-I-D-E.
Murder of a tree.
Yes, yes, that's right, the intentional killing of a tree. And the city council under Peter Vallone vastly increased the penalties for arborcide. So it's now, you might go to jail, a substantial fine.
We have 2 minutes left. What do you consider, excuse me, your most important legacy as Parks Commissioner?
Well, I think that the 2,000 green streets that I caused to have built.
Green streets?
Green streets are taking areas that were previously paved and planting them, planting trees and shrubs in them. These are usually at intersections or at triangles or places where there were wide areas in the streets. You can't do many in Manhattan because it's a grid pattern, but out in the outer boroughs, there are many places to put them. And I'm very proud of the names that I gave to hundreds of parks which had no name. Because when you have a name, you have identity. That's very important.
Name two.
Well, Poor Richard's Park. Poor Richard's Park is up at 109th Street and 3rd Avenue, and it's in right near the Benjamin Franklin School. You know, Benjamin Franklin wrote Poor Richard's Almanac.
Yes, that's the connection.
That's the connection.
And what do you see as the toughest problem that you had to deal with as City Parks Commissioner that you left frustrated about?
A lack of funds. Parks comes in last in the budget. They take care of police and fire. They take care of essential services. They take care of transit because it raises all that revenue through fares. But Parks is traditionally shortchanged by every mayor. The way to resolve it is by giving Parks control over things earned through concessions on parklands. They would increase. Parks
Except
would
we
become
just have 15
self-supporting.
seconds, but in the poorer neighborhoods, this is an eternal problem. You're not going to make as much by concessions, and so they'll remain underfunded.
Well, but it's not park by park. What you collect citywide, you spend. Of course, there'll be a transfer of wealth from Central Park to the poorer parks. Of course.
And that's where we have to leave it. Henry Stern, thank you so much, and happy summer.
Thank you.
Hope you get to spend a lot of it in the city parks. Well, coming up next, what's happening at Celebrate Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan's River to River Festival, and why they're about more than just summer fun. This is Brian Lehrer Live.
Every single community in the Spanish-speaking world is represented in Nueva York. Nueva York, a show about Latino culture in this city. The show airs the first and second week of the month.
Sure, my neighbors Jean and Louise, they may be superheroes with superpowers, but that doesn't make them so super at saving energy and money.
Honey!
I may not be able to harness the power of the elements, but I save significant cash and help the environment with appliances, electronics, and windows featuring the Energy Star label. Discover your own energy-saving superpowers with Energy Star. Go to getenergysmart.org.
Mom, Dad's making fondue again.
Once you see the world through math and science, you'll never see anything the same way again. Go to girlsgotech.org.
You'll see.
Does peace really have a chance within our lifetime? At Rotary, We believe it does. We've created programs at universities around the world, dedicated solely to teaching peace to a new generation. There's a new symbol for peace. Rotary.
And welcome to both of you. Leslie from Celebrate Brooklyn, thanks for coming on. Bill from River to River, thank you so much for coming on. I know you both have great stuff coming this summer, and we'll talk about it. But in both your cases, your festivals don't come from nowhere. They come from somewhere, and not just because the arts are cool and the arts are fun and the arts are great. So Leslie, tell us about the origins of Celebrate Brooklyn.
Celebrate Brooklyn is in its 28th summer this summer. It started in 1979 as the brainchild of the then borough president, Howard Golden, who saw his very blighted borough depressed in so many different ways, and a very, very dangerous and frightening Prospect Park, maybe more frightening than it was actually dangerous. And one of his thoughts was that we need to bring people back into Prospect Park, and we need to nurture arts in Brooklyn. And so Celebrate Brooklyn Festival was born. And initially we offered mostly Brooklyn artists, and it was amazing. People really came. They really enjoyed sitting in this, you know, in front of this pretty decrepit 1920s band shell, but hearing their neighbors and other Brooklynites and seeing other Brooklynites and being part of a community really started to make a difference.
And did you originally do things in the day, or was part of the point to sort of take back the night for regular Brooklynites?
Exactly. It was to take back the night. They were always nighttime performances, and so all of a sudden you had a stream of people coming in and out of Prospect Park. And Prospect Park has come a very, very long way since then.
Very
and
long
it is
way.
really one of the crown jewels of
New York City. Not to mention the real estate values around around Prospect Park.
Yeah.
And Bill, River to River grew out of 9/11.
That's exactly right. I mean, essentially post September 11th, a lot of uncertainty about the the future of Lower Manhattan, who was going to be working down there, what was going to be happening in Lower Manhattan, and a handful of the major arts presenters and producers who had actually been working in Lower Manhattan before September 11th essentially got together, decided to pool their resources, to pool a great body of programming, and form the festival. And essentially, with those 6 organizations, and actually with American Express coming on as our title sponsor, really became a revitalization project, a major revitalization program for the neighborhood as a whole, to bring people back down into the parks, the plazas, but also to bring them to the restaurants and to the retail shopping locations in Lower Manhattan.
So in a way, it's kind of a lost leader, because all the music, all the other performances are free,
Exactly.
and that gets people downtown, and then maybe they'll use the stores and the restaurants.
Well, I mean, we're very much sort of, as compared to Celebrate Brooklyn, we're very much, the Cub Festival of New York. So it's an evolving sort of philosophy, but absolutely the idea is to work with, to use the arts as an economic development engine to bring people down there, and not just people from outside of Lower Manhattan. We obviously have a huge growing residential base, and a significant number of the professional bases return to Lower Manhattan. So we serve, we program for them as well, some lunchtime, but a lot of after work, after dinner programs to bring people from all over the city.
Did you say a Cub Festival?
That's what I
You're
said.
the baby bear?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of great programming in the city, and a lot of it's been going on for a long time. So in a sense, we are sort of the up-and-comer, the upstart in our 5th year. But we think we play nice with all the other festivals. So we're just sort of, we want to add to the mix of all the great options in the summertime in New York City.
Leslie, you mentioned the decrepit old band shell. It's a beautiful band shell now. Has it been renovated?
It has been. It's actually been renovated twice since 1979, and it is now truly a world-class venue. It's a, when you're sitting outside under the stars, canopy of trees. It's incredibly green right now. We're very excited about, what the spring has brought for summer. You actually feel like you're very, very far away from an urban environment. And, as I was saying to you a little bit earlier, it feels a little bit like Tanglewood to me.
Yes.
It feels that far away.
And it's a great heady experience to be on that stage, as I've had the privilege of being. I introduced Spalding Gray there a few years ago before he died, and to stand up on that stage under the arc of that band shell, or the arch of that band shell, and to be looking out at the trees of Prospect Park and the beautiful diversity of Brooklyn in the audience. what a heady experience.
Well, truly our audiences bring us so much joy because, we get several 100,000 people each year over the course of our 23 performances, and they are people from all walks of life in Brooklyn. And we really strive for that in our programming, to attract many, many different ethnic groups in Brooklyn, many different cultures. And it's a, for the people who run the program, when we look around and we see people, feeling great joy themselves, it, only fuels our passion for our work.
Bill, it's amazing the role that the arts have played in the revitalization of Lower Manhattan, and it might not have been the first thing that the average person would think of in terms of bringing people downtown after the attacks. But the Tribeca Film Festival has become so central and made a lot of news this year, debuting United 93 there and some other things. But it's become a major film festival born out of trying to revive the economy of Lower Manhattan. And River to River, same thing.
Same thing. I mean, we estimate that we do a lot of audience research to find out why people come and motivations and how they get there, but also things like how much money are they spending. And we're estimating the festival's generating $40–45 million in new economic activity for downtown, and that's incredibly important for a neighborhood that's still struggling to get back on its feet. But it's more about sort of the sense of community, of bringing New Yorkers down to the great, not just the concerts and the dance shows, but also the great museums and other locations in Lower Manhattan, and sort of exploring some of those places like Castle Clinton that are sort of, as you said, in Prospect Park, sort of feel like you're not in an urban environment, but you're at a beautiful outdoor, aesthetically amazing venue, or the great shows at the Seaport that could be on the Jersey Boardwalk or somewhere else, but actually are a beautiful venue, becoming a really well respected venue now in Lower Manhattan. So. And
the fact that both festivals have been so successful and have served these social purposes, coming out of the attacks, coming out of the blight, I think is really a lesson for people to understand why funding of the arts is important.
Absolutely. And
how the arts play a role in the community at large, and it's not just some elite, let's just go out for an evening kind of thing.
Right. Well, one of the beauties of Celebrate Brooklyn is how egalitarian it is. I mean, it is really a world-class festival in a world-class venue with world-class artists, and yet it feels so much like neighborhood Brooklyn at the same time.
And everything is free, right?
Everything is free, although we have a suggested donation of $3, less than the subway fare you take to, get there and back.
Same at River to River. Everything is free.
All of our programs are free. In particular, our outdoor shows. We actually sort of feel the same way. World-class programming is what brings people out to great shows. So we do our best to book the best shows that we can and present them for free in Lower Manhattan. Absolutely.
Yeah. I go back to my childhood in New York City. I grew up in Queens. Some of my first experiences hearing rock and roll, hearing jazz, even hearing classical music were outdoors in the summer. Yep. And I wonder about your own childhoods. Are you trying to recreate things that you had as kids? Did either of you grow up in New York? Leslie, you want to start that one?
Well, I will say that our program director, Jack Walsh, is a born and bred Park Sloper. And when Jack was growing up in Park Slope, he's about my age, there was no programming in Prospect Park or otherwise to go to sort of really elevate your soul. The first time that I attended Celebrate, not the first time, but the first time in a long time that I attended Celebrate, it did really bring me back to lying on the lawn outside of the shed at Tanglewood, first being dragged kicking and screaming to hear the Boston Symphony Orchestra by my parents, and then hearing some rock and roll in the early 70s. So, and I think that feeling of complete serenity and peace and joy and great music that just kind of permeates every corner of your body and your mind is an incredible feeling, and that's what I think we bring with probably both of our festivals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder if we were at the same place in the same time and didn't know each other many years ago. I saw Santana for the first time there, Miles Davis, Joni Mitchell.
Oh my goodness.
The Who.
I saw Seals and Croft, and I think James Taylor. So
and of course the Brooklyn, the
Boston Symphony Orchestra,
which was a wonderful experience.
Extraordinary.
For a kid who was resistant to going to a classical music concert, to be out there and hear the music fill up that shed is a great thing. How about you?
Well, I have a slightly different experience. I actually grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, so I spent a lot of my summers out either running around, playing sports, but then when we would literally pack up the station wagon and go visit friends or family, in some of the major cities, in Chicago or in Boston or in New York, we would always go to concerts and go to sort of outdoor events. So I have very fond memories of seeing the Boston Pops, on the Charles River and things like that, and I think that was one of the great things about coming to big urban centers is being able to experience some of those things and for free, which is not always the case in smaller towns. So slightly different experience, but it's definitely I think it's definitely part of the motivation, sort of the internal. I mean, I'm a music nut anyway, so I think it's more, and potentially going to the the rock and roll shows and clubs was more of what sort of sparked me in the summertime than the outdoor shows. So I'm really pleased to be able to to put on world-class shows and bring artists to the to new audiences and introduce new artists to those audiences and be able to explain and expand people's access to the arts, and that's
so
a big
how do you
thing.
pick them for River to River?
Well, I'm really lucky in that the festival works with about 6 or 7 different programmers. So we have curators working at we have Deborah Simon booking at the World Financial Center, and Sidney Druckmann booking at Battery Park City, and Steve Dima booking at the South Street Seaport, and Valerie Lewis. So we've got great minds, and then we co-produce our dance series, Evening Stars with the Joyce, and we co-produce our classical action series with our classical music series with Classical Action. So we have great resources. We pool great minds, and that's the way I think we get a really diverse, high quality, series, summer-long series.
That's an interesting sounding name. What's Classical Action?
Classical Action is the classical music arm of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. So they are the classical music industry's response to the AIDS crisis. So we work with them to book our classical music series, but also to help raise awareness of their fundraising efforts.
And I understand that you do try and focus to some degree at River to River on programming for underserved communities.
Absolutely. We feel like there's New York is the center of the arts world, but it's expensive to go see dance or music or visual arts in some of the locations. So we want to, and I think it's part of the mission of both of our festivals is to introduce people to the arts that may not otherwise have access to it, or to bring their entire family and throw a blanket down and bring a picnic and see Merce Cunningham, or to see Lyle Lovett, someone that they might not otherwise pay to go see in a ticketed venue.
Same with Brooklyn?
No, absolutely. I think that our philosophy is very much to allow people to make themselves very much at home with the arts, so they don't feel intimidated by it, so they can appreciate it, and that it is something they'll carry with them at all times. Right. I think our programming is done a little bit differently, actually. We do our programming in-house. We have a number of great partnerships. We have a wonderful partnership this summer with Carnegie Hall, which I'll tell you a little bit about. But basically, we have 2 people who all, starting now for next summer, are cooking up ideas about who and what we'll put together and make this a really magical festival.
So are there any acts that you thought, well, I don't know if this is going to work for New York, but then it did?
I actually can't think of anybody. No.
How about you, Bill?
Well, going back to Kentucky, we've presented a fair amount of bluegrass, Ricky Skaggs and Ralph Stanley this year. You always sort of wonder if that's going to draw in a cosmopolitan place like New York City, and we've packed houses for those kind of shows. So, in my mind, as diverse as program as you can present is a challenge, but we want to challenge our audiences to take in as much new and innovative programming as they can.
Who comes to see bluegrass in Lower Manhattan?
The Ricky Skaggs show a couple weeks ago. I mean, it was everyone from young alt rockers to older retirees. It was a really diverse audience. Unfortunately we had to move the show inside, so it was a slightly smaller audience. But we were at the Schimmel Center at Pace University, packed the house with 800 people, and people were amazed. I mean, it was a great show, and people were just going nuts at the end of it.
And conversely, are there things that you thought would be great, but for some reason didn't work outside, or didn't work in a park, or anything like that?
I think that we've got some amazing dance coming up this summer. I think that producing dance is a bit of a challenge in our venue, and also this year for the first time we're putting on first time in a long time we're putting on theater. We're doing one night show with Brave New World Theater, and I think we think this is going to be spectacular. They're doing The Great White Hope. This is a group that you may have heard of. They did one To Kill a Mockingbird on porches in Ditmas Park last summer, and they're coming to do Great White Hope at Celebrate this summer, and we are all very curious to see how it comes out. I think it's going to be fabulous.
How about you?
Something that didn't work?
Didn't work.
Gosh, I mean...
Or what's the hardest?
The hardest thing, I think, are films outside in the summer is a challenge, you know, because you've got to deal with, you know, watching the clock and setting sun and things like that.
The films are very popular.
Oh,
so
yeah, no, I had a reaction to that. I mean, this year we have our Movies Under the Stars, sponsored by Princess Cruises, but we have done this amazing set of series for several years of music, of movies to live music, and it is such a winner. I mean,
old silent films.
Yes, this year we're doing Blackmail with the Alloy Orchestra, which is Alfred Hitchcock's last silent film. Last year we did Phantom of the Opera, and it was wonderful. And then this year we're doing Dracula. This is the one we're doing with Carnegie Hall. We're doing Bela Lugosi's 1931 silent film classic, Dracula, to a score composed by Philip Glass, performed by Philip Glass and the Kronos Quartet.
Wow.
And we have a 50-foot...
When is that?
Yeah,
that was July 27th.
I may have to take a night off from River to River to come.
It's going to be really spectacular. And we have a, we have a 50-foot screen, which I think is the same size that they have in Bryant Park. And if you ask me, which are the ones that, I cannot wait for, it is all of these music. We have Yo La Tengo, which is an amazing alt-rock group, performing live to a French filmmakers' underwater documentaries that are supposed to be so beautiful.
Wow.
I mean, it's just, it's beautiful music and it's beautiful visuals. So,
sounds great.
Come see them.
I will, absolutely. I mean, I don't think we ever have anything that doesn't work. We try some unusual things. We were now doing this parade to kick off the festival through Lower Manhattan, which is sort of street theater gone amok through the sort of canyons of Lower Manhattan. It's interesting, it's unusual. We do our best to get in people's way, but stay out of people's way. So that is always a eye-opener, but I wouldn't call it a failed experiment. It's just an ongoing experiment. It's a great time and a great way to get the festival started.
So I could say that at this table we have sort of rival summer gangs of New York. If we had Summer Stage here, we could have a rumble. Do you feel competitive with each other at all?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only way we sort of compete maybe is for some artists. We're all trying to book some of the same artists, I suspect, and maybe for sponsors a little bit. But I think that, first of all, obviously there are enough people to go around in New York City, and there's enough great performing artists out there to book, numerous stages. So I look at it as a sort of a part of New York summer, cornucopia of stuff to do, free stuff to do all over town.
They've been running their festival for 5 years, and Celebrate has had 5 spectacular years. And and our perspective is, you can't have enough free, great art in the city of, 9 million people at this point?
Something like that.
So,
counting the uncounted.
That's right.
Yes. So no Arts Rumble tonight. How much are you government funded at this point?
Well, we're an organization of 4 programs. Our organization is BRIC, Brooklyn Information and Culture, and we get some grants as an organization-wide. I think that certainly the support we receive from the city, from the state, and from the federal government is important to us, but I think the statistic is we raise 8 private dollars for every $1 we get from the government, which I think is a pretty good leverage ratio.
How about you?
We receive some support from LMDC, and produce a program with the Signature Theater, the Drawing Center, and the Joyce Theater. So LMDC is a great source of support for us, and has been.
Development Corporation,
exactly.
And then after 9/11.
Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, his office supports the festival, but other than that, we actually don't get any other funding from the city or the state. So all of our funding is raised through, corporate sponsorship or philanthropic development with corporations and entities around the city.
Leslie got to brag about some of the stuff that she has coming up this summer. How about you? What are some of your favorite things?
Well, I mentioned the film series, and we're pretty excited about ours because we're doing sort of a New York-centric series with with 4 films on a really cool new space in downtown called the Elevated Acre, which is down at 55 Water, and we're doing.
Great name.
Yeah, it's a great space. It's actually above. Sort of Water Street and South Street, and it's a beautiful space that the folks at 55 Water have actually redeveloped themselves as a public-private park. We're showing the movies Pick Up on South Street. We're showing Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. We're showing Breakfast in the Park, and we're showing Rear Window, and all of these are being introduced by younger New York experimental filmmakers who are showing some of their shorts, all of whom are based on their lives in New York or films in New York. So that's great. We're really looking forward to that.
And music?
The Castle Clinton series is always amazing. I mean, we have the Hold Steady this summer, Okkerville River. We've got the Dave Holland Quartet. Seaport Music series is always amazing. Looking forward to Hot Chip and the Box Tops with Alex Chilton playing in New York for the first time in a really long time. So that'll be great. I don't know. I mean, Sightlines, our performance, site-specific performance and dance series that Lower Manhattan Cultural Council produces is amazing. So lots of good stuff.
4th of July weekend is coming up. What do you have?
We actually don't do anything on Monday and Tuesday nights, but that weekend we have Angelique Kidjo coming. She is. We have our South African festival. Actually, that's a few days after 4th of July.
Okay.
That should be pretty amazing. On the goodness, I'm losing track. I'm blanking for the moment. Go over here and I'll do my
our big show this year. The Downtown Alliance is presenting concerts in Battery Park and now part of River to River for going on 10 years. And this year we have Belle and Sebastian with Martha Wainwright. Although it's a ticketed show this year, and I believe it's sold out at this point. And then that night we also co-present with Macy's the Macy's Fireworks in Lower Manhattan. So that'll be.
So that's on the 4th.
On the 4th, actually. Both of those
and
events are on the 4th.
Anything on the 3rd or the 2nd or the 1st?
Actually, no. We're sort of saving up our energy for those two shows. So we'll send them
to
Brooklyn. So you should go to Brooklyn.
We have. I'm sorry.
It
Yes. Well, I looked and then I said, "Oh, how could I have forgotten?" We have, this, just fabulous indie rock triple bill on the Friday night before 4th of July. Brooklyn's TV on the radio, Matt Pond, PA, and Voxtrot on Friday night. And then we do have our South African concert which is honoring Brenda Fassie with the incredible songstress Angelique Kidjo, who is from Benin, lives in Paris and Park Slope.
She's amazing.
Well, I think we have proven that even for people who can't afford to go away to the Hamptons or to Tanglewood, New York is still a summer festival. Leslie, thank you very much. Bill, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Happy summer.
Thank you.